Well, let's open our Bibles to the curriculum that God established to be taught church-wide to every believer in Christ's church. And that's recorded by Paul 2,000 years ago in Titus chapter 2. So the Bible that I'm holding right now contains within it the curriculum that God instructed the Apostle Paul to institute in Christ's church across the world and throughout the ages to be taught to every man and woman and every young man and young woman. Every single individual in the church was to be touched by this curriculum that God inspired Paul to write, and he sent it out by way of letter to one of the missionary church planters named Titus. That's what we're looking at this morning. We began our study of that curriculum in Titus 2 about a year ago. It was on Mother's Day last year that I've told you this before, that I thought I was just going to do a novel Mother's Day message. I'd always done everything else, but I never had done the Titus 2 Mother. So I just was going to zero in on one phrase of Titus 2. And after spending an entire week studying it, I found out that it was much more than you could do on Mother's Day. And you can see it's taken a whole year. But before us in Titus 2 lays the elements or the characteristics of what God says a useful, godly servant of the Lord not only acts like, but really is like on the inside. Now remember, that's what these characteristics are. Titus 2 is all about not a set of rules that are supposed to be posted and people try to comply with them. Kind of like the signs we see everywhere around us. There are all these signs that say, don't do this, whatever, to help social order. That isn't what this is. This was a curriculum that was supposed to be nurtured into the life of every member of Christ's church. It was a curriculum that was to be not just dispensed, but lived out on the inside. That's what Paul intended. Well, first, I'd like to trace with you through the pages of Titus 2 the entire scope of God's nurturing plan. I want you to think of this as we look at it as what God says that a strong believer will be nurtured in and nurture others in. In fact, I was thinking this week about how Paul went through life in ministry. Do you remember when he started his missionary journeys, he was actually being mentored in missions by Barnabas, and Paul went with him, and he dragged along Titus. Do you think of the older man, Barnabas, the man that was in the growth process, Paul, and the younger man, Titus, in his wake. Timothy and Titus also in his wake. And if you think about that, all of us should have someone that is further along, that we admire, that we see as a godly mentor. We ourselves should also be passing that on to someone that is younger than us in the Lord. And that concept is what Paul lived and what we see. And like Peter said in his letters, our hearts get stirred every time we're reminded. Remember Peter wrote in his epistles, I want to stir you up by way of reminder. Peter said over and over again what Jesus had said, but every time he reminded them of those things, it stirred their hearts. Just before we go on to the next element, which is going to be finishing, hopefully, that's the next element in Titus 2, I want to show you this church-wide discipleship curriculum. In fact, some of you, if you weren't here since Mother's Day last year, you maybe don't even know what I'm talking about when I say that. But the curriculum written by Paul in Titus 2 starts with the backbone of any church, the older men. These men were to be mature, godly, gifted men who are in step with the Spirit. Now look what an older, godly, mature man in step with the Spirit, what he looks like. That's Titus 2, verse 1.